No, no.
Good evening, everyone. It's Juli Pitra. It's time for my Pitranomics Thursday talk, and I'm so excited about this topic. We're going to talk a little bit about an introduction to real estate. And for those of you that don't know me, so my name is Juli Pitra. I'm married to a wonderful man named Andre Pitra, almost 27 years. I'm originally from Colorado Springs, Colorado. I've got two kids. One's 23, that's my daughter, and one's 21, that's my son. A little bit about my history. So I spent 7 years in the electrical power industry and went and got my MBA. And after that, well, during that, I met a wonderful man. We got married, and I decided to be a stay-at-home wife for a while. And around about 50 years old, I said, you know what? Let's do something else. Let's add to the list. So I started becoming a real estate investor, and that's just been a lot of fun. So anybody can change their career. You don't have to wait until, or think it's too late just because you're a certain age. What Pitranomics is a combination of the strategies that my husband and I have followed to grow, protect, and transfer wealth. Wealth is what you define it to be. So there's no set definition that applies to everybody. You have to decide what your most optimal life looks like, and that's what being wealthy is. I got a lot of the concepts that I learned from my mother, Jacqueline Tucker. She's an amazing woman, gone too soon. She died in 1996, but left me with a great deal of information that I found out later not everybody had access to. In addition, I married this wonderful man who grew up in the former Czechoslovakia. And there are a lot of lessons that come from growing up in a country like that, in a time like that, from who are also very about money and thrifty and savvy. Combination of that is Pitranomics. It's all about how the Pitras grow, protect, and transfer wealth. And I'm trying to convey those strategies to you. So I hope that we're going to have a good time tonight. It's going to be very interactive. Okay, every time I do this, I have this wonderful non-smooth way to try to get my presentation up. One day I'll be able to do it clearly. Let's see. If anybody has clues, you can always write to me as to what those are, how to do that. But in the meantime, we'll just do it like this. We'll go to, I had it set up to presenter view. All right. So today's strategy is all about sending your dollars and come back. For tonight. There are 10 parts to economics. The important thing to remember is that you start with knowing what you want to accomplish. That's in strategy number 1, the assessment, and also understanding what resources you have available. And we focus on money, energy, and time. And then the second step is to determine your roadmap. And that's how do you eat an elephant? That's one bite at a time. Don't get overwhelmed by these long-term goals. Chop them up into little pieces so you can bite them more clearly. Today's strategy, send your dollars out, is all about what do you do to make sure the money that you have is working for you. You can't hoard it, put it under a mattress, leave it in a savings account that doesn't earn a lot of money. That makes you lose spending power. Your money has to be out there working hard on your behalf. So let's talk about the real estate edition. Do you want to get started? Do you want to learn about it? Are you excited? I sure hope you are. So to start, what questions do you ask yourself before you get into real estate? Now, I'm going to be honest. I didn't ask myself a lot of questions. I wasn't as introspective as I should have been before I got started. I just wanted to do something different. But I did get some good advice from a mentor of ours, and he said, get some education first. And I am thankful for that because I know a lot of people who are novices at investment, they make a lot of mistakes because they don't have the correct guidance. So I started with a company called Lifestyles Unlimited, and I'm very grateful for the environment and the experience. I met some wonderful people, some that I can sort of bounce ideas off of. They're in the business with me, and some that have proven to be very good mentors and advisors as well. So it's a really good thing to surround yourself with the right people because they're going to ask you, what are your goals and objectives? What are you trying to accomplish? And they are going to ask you, what resources do you have? Because one person with one set of goals and objectives is going to go about it differently than the other. And those with different resources can pursue those paths a little bit differently. So make sure you are able to find out what your goals and objectives are. And the other thing, what is my risk tolerance? And the way it was described to me is, how can you put your money to work and still sleep at night? Because the thing about investments, it's not guaranteed. You have to be able to not totally stress out about what your money is doing. And again, for full transparency, right now, I'm in the stressed out mode. I don't like it. A lot of things are up in the air, and it's not been the most fun when I'm stressed out about my investments. So I'm trying to move back toward more simpatico equilibrium. But the whole point is understand what your risk tolerance is and try not to stay on the other side of it. How much capital do I have and what is my budget? Now, I do hear from a lot of people that, you don't need money to invest in real estate. All you got to do is hustle. You make this one great deal, then you'll have enough money to fund. And I will say this, it is possible to not have any money in real estate, to hustle to make some particular deal work that brings in a lot of money, and then you can just coast from there. But that is not normal. For most people, it's a grind. Either you start out with limited money and you grind step by step to claw your way to accumulation, or you start out with a great deal of accumulation, but you have to be very careful about how you put it to work because you want to already accomplish. And then you have to, what is your budget? And when I say budget, I don't mean just time. I'm sorry, just money. I mean also your time, because there's nothing about investing in real estate that's truly passive. So you have to allocate that resource. And how much time, how much energy do you want to spend doing it? For me, it's most I do. And I'm challenged. But if you have to kind of decide how much time and energy and money do I want to put toward the investment vehicle I've chosen? You need to learn what that's going to be like for real estate investing. What type of investment best aligns with my goals? Real estate investing is sort of a whole circle of things that could incorporate quite a bit of different styles of investing. So for one, there's passive versus active. Passive might be you get in on somebody's deal, you contribute money, you don't have any say on how the asset is managed. You get hopefully distributions, and at the final termination of the deal, you get some return of capital plus an additional return. That's great. You don't have to do much about it, but you do need to pay attention to the financials. You need to make sure you participate in the investor functions, but it's relatively passive. The complete antithesis, of course, is to be the one actually running that deal. So it's maybe your money plus someone else's, but you're managing the asset. You're remodeling the asset, you're managing the tenants, you're deeply involved in all that. And that's active investing. And it takes a lot of time. And sometimes it takes a lot of grit because it can wear you out. It can be a grind. If you are the person that just wants to put your money out there and let it grow, you have to decide that. And do you want that investment not to take time away from what's going on with your life? For me, I'm in a bit of a transition. I want to pull back and relax a little bit, but I am grateful for what I have learned as a result of how actively involved I have been. At this point, again, transparency, I feel a little overwhelmed. And so I want to pull back. I want to be a little more relaxed, less stressed out, less busy. By the way, part of that might be because I have a pivotal birthday coming up, and those always have me thinking about, okay, what's next? And so 2024 is the year I turn 60, and it might be time for yet another change. So there's that. Oh, what happened here? Other questions to ask: what are the current relevant market conditions in the industry in which I'm trying to invest? Everybody right now, I'm sure, is hearing, oh my gosh, there's going to be a bubble. It's going to burst. Interest rates are high. Taxes are high. Insurance rates are high, blah, 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 blah. Yes, you can always make money as long as you understand what the market conditions are and act accordingly. There aren't really good or bad market conditions. There's being prepared or unprepared for the market conditions. And I just saw a big lightning strike, so that was a little scary. Hope it doesn't strike the house. I don't know if you heard that. That was the thunder. So what financing options are available? This goes back to, you may not have money of your own, maybe, and that's not really what I believe, but you have to have money available. You have to have some kind of financing. So there's self-financing, and then there's OPM, other people's money. So it could be a bank, it could be a private lender. There are lots of options, but you need to figure out what's available. And before you start investing, start looking into lender terms if you feel you're going to need a lender. You have to know what all of those obligations are going to be before you purchase the property. If you don't, you run into a lot of trouble with the performance of your asset. And keep in mind, this is a physical asset that requires managing, so it produces revenue. How will those properties be managed? Are you going to be a self-managing type of investor? I did that. I started that way. And then at one point I got to a certain number and I realized I couldn't keep acquiring if I was still managing. So then I made the decision I need a property manager so I could continue to acquire. Again, I'm going to be very transparent about a lot of things that I'm feeling right now because I am transitioning. And I'm not sure that my present model is going to work for me going forward. And I actually thought it would work for me forever, but that is one thing that is perfectly acceptable in your investment strategy. You always change how you manifest it. It's not failure, it's a transition as long as it's still meeting with the goals you're trying to accomplish. What are the potential tax implications? Now, I've said before, it's important to have a tax strategist, not just someone who files your taxes when you're going to get into a complicated business like real estate. Doesn't mean you can't use that person to file your taxes, but you need to start thinking, what should my business look like going forward in order to mediate my tax burden? Not, oh my gosh, everything has happened and I'm just stuck with the taxes that I have to pay. This is a strategic point of your business. You do planning ahead of time. You ask questions ahead of time. Try not to be reactive in this area. How will I evaluate potential opportunities? And we'll get into that some in this particular lesson, but keep in mind, everybody is looking for something different from their investment activities. So you have to make sure you have the key performance indicators that indicate success for you. You can't always use something that somebody else is using. So when you hear, oh, the number to remember is this, or it's return on investment, or return on equity, or it's cap rate, it depends on what your goals are and what you're trying to get out of that activity as you're going to determine what this is. and how you evaluate whether a particular project will be successful for you. And then what contingency plans are in place in case things don't go according to plan. And things never go according to plan. I haven't had a single project that went according to plan. And I've been doing this since 2015. Keep in mind, there are people that have been doing it way longer, and they mostly agree with me. You have your anticipation of how things are going to go, but how successful you are depends on how well you're able to handle and absorb the chaos that the contingencies bring, and then still bring the revenue that you want out of the project. What I like about real estate is that it's very forgiving in the long run. So short-term real estate investing moves are not as interesting to me, because if you make a mistake, then you just have to register that mistake and keep going. But when you're planning on a more of a buy and hold strategy, you have time to recover from an initial misstep. And I'd like to share the story that the very first project I bought, I was completely overwhelmed. I had been so tired of chasing deals. I finally just grabbed this one by the hands and said, this is going to be it. For better, for worse, this is what I'm doing. And so many things went wrong, and it cost twice as much as I expected, and it took much longer than I was told. But my first deal that I got and put into service in 2015 has been one of my highest performing assets. And I was thankful to have someone tell me when I was ready to quit and just take my loss, keep going. Real estate is forgiving in the long term. That was great advice. I love good advice. I don't always appear to listen to it at first. I've been told I'm hard-headed, but I listen to it. It's there. It's percolating. I bring it out eventually. So what are the potential risks for real estate investing? Let me just start with, there are potential risks with any kind of investing. Potential risks with almost any type of activity. So you can't let the risks stop you from doing something. Do your best to identify what they are and have at least a strategy, if not a plan, in place on how to deal with them. So one of the things that happens is that you'll have cash flow shortfalls or budget excesses in your SOW or scope of work. So if you're doing renovations, and this happened in the first house that I did, you have a plan for how much work is needed to bring the property to a certain level so it generates the anticipated income by attracting the type of client or tenant or whatever. My first deal, like I told you, the renovation was twice as much. There were things that I did not think I had to consider. That was my inexperience that needed to be considered that came up. And so, for example, I hadn't planned on replacing the plumbing or doing the foundation. The information I got were these things didn't need to be done, and it turned out they did. Huge shed that needed demoed. Pretty penny. There was something else. I forgot the other big item. I replaced the plumb. Did a lot of work. The budget, I think, was originally supposed to be about $17,000. I remember this is back in 2015 when things were a lot cheaper. It turned out being closer to $35,000. So with the acquisition costs and the amount of the renovation, I had more into it than it was worth. When I refinanced, I still had more into it than I had planned. But like I said, in the long run, that worked. If that had been a flip where I buy the property, renovate it, and sell it, I would have lost money. I wouldn't have been able to recover that. But buy and hold, which is what I know more about, I was able to recover from that. There are property casualty, there's damage, all of that I have had to deal with, and that messes with your cash flow. Having proper insurance helps mediate some of that, but it does not clear it out. So when you're doing your calculations for what makes a good deal, you have to allow for, in your expected return, possibilities that things like this will happen. And so even if you're not profitable as far as a cash flowing perspective from rent in a particular year, you have to make sure you're asset has been set up so that in the long run, all of the possible income streams and benefits from that project are still existing. Another thing to keep in mind is the tenant and landlord legislation that is available to you in whatever state you're in. Texas is a pretty landlord-friendly state. I did have some properties in a as landlord on paper, and actually did make good money. After looking at the whole project, it was fairly profitable. It was just a nightmare. And trying to deal with something in another state, I didn't have the same people resources I had when I went into it. It was just really hard. And so the amount of time I had to deal with it, the amount of stress that was involved, the uncertainty around the cash flows made it something that was better sold than kept. After seeing, yes, it was a good deal. Yes, I'm glad I went to it, but now I want to keep things a little bit closer to hand and make sure I know the people that I'm working with. I don't have a problem with investing remotely, but you better know the people that are your boots on your ground and believe in them. So another possibility could be a shrinking tenant pool. Job instability in an area will definitely impact how many great tenants you have. Fortunately, in the DFW area, we still have a strong tenant pool, but I am seeing concessions. I'm seeing longer days on market for properties being listed. I'm seeing downward pressure on rents. The important thing to remember that a tenant-landlord relationship is a relationship. You're providing a service, an asset in which they live. So if you have the more of a servant mindset, I want to provide a decent place, which is what I try to do, provide a decent place for people that they can afford, something they can afford. And if you bring in the right people that are grateful for that and willing to respect your property and not cause a whole lot of trouble, great, 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 great. Doesn't always happen. You have to allow for the fact you have to evict people or not accept people. But again, that should be included in your metrics to account for such things. Maintenance issues. I have right now some pest control problems in some of my Dallas properties. And so we've got to get these vermin out, and it's not cheap and it's not easy. And I guess we could go in there and just, unalive the little suckers, but we're trying to do a more humane approach and take them out and put them somewhere, but you've got to, entice them to come out. And right now I have a house that's full of skunks. Is that fun? No, because they smell. I have never really smelled how strong a skunk is until this year, and it's pretty foul. I wouldn't want to live in it, and so I want to make sure that the property isn't as inviting to the skunks and that the people who live there can live there without that strong smell. So that's something you have to work on, and you have to pay for it. It is your responsibility as the property owner. Now, if their style invites thing, but if give then you try to address them and you ask for your tenant participation, because how they live and how they treat the property impacts what your maintenance issues are. And one of the reasons you do background checks on tenants, potential tenants, is to find out if the previous landlord would welcome them back. Because most landlords want three things. They want them to take care of the property, and they don't want the tenants to cause a lot of trouble. So good tenants are great. We want good tenants. Good landlords want good tenants. And if you hear some of the stories about all landlords are bad, not all of them, just like all tenants aren't good. So there's a little dance to find the right person to partner with on that. And then there are the increasing costs, which is really hitting me big time. We had a recent surge in property values here in the Dallas-Fort Worth in the last 2 years or so. So that means amazingly high tax increases. However, the rents haven't really kept up with the tax increases and the insurance increases that we faced. So now the properties that I have that I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to hold on to them forever. Maybe it might be time to make a change and make those into owner-occupied properties for someone else instead of them being rental properties that I manage, because they might make a better home. They might then, and hopefully they will be able to mediate their taxes better than I can because it's an investment property rather than homestead. And then the rising cost of everything, construction and all that, means that anything you fix is costing more than it used to. Services are getting expensive. Finding good people to perform the services is getting difficult. So protect your contractors. And then we have things like the unexpected, what happened with COVID. And that eviction moratorium was pretty interesting. Many tenants thought they could just stop paying rent and that they had, the power. One thing I liked about that, and this is where networking comes into place. As soon as the COVID quarantine and all that started, I was on Zooms almost every night with different investors, with lawyers. We were all strategizing how to do some of these things going forward. And that is one thing. This is a way to mediate that risk, is to make sure you're networking with people that are knowledgeable about your industry. I did have some issues during COVID, but during COVID, I also evicted 4 tenants, even with the eviction moratorium on a failure to pay. There are other ways to get your tenants out. Most landlords have sort of adjusted how they rent now because of that. Anything like that causes change, and you have to be mindful of it and stay prepared. What is a good deal? That's a question I get a lot. How do you know if this is a good deal? That's a personal decision. You have to be prepared to decide what's a good deal for you. However, how do you go about that? You have to determine your guiding criteria. You can't know if you're successful if you don't know the metric which indicates you've been successful in your endeavor. You just can't know. You have to know the finish line. So there are a few I'm going to talk about here. There's something called cash on cash return, which is the annual cash you get from this property based on the cash you have invested in the property. And that's the one I use. There's return on equity, which is how much is the net profit. And by the way, profit for the year and cash for the year aren't the same. The profit for the year based on the equity that you have. And so those two numbers aren't really going to be the same, but some people are more triggered by, if I have a lot of equity and my return on equity falls, that's going to trigger a different decision than someone who maybe says, I'm not keeping this property no matter what. I don't care about return on equity. I care about cash on cash return. Both are valid strategies. And then there's the total yield of a project. So let's say you have a pretty fixed timeline that you want to go into a project. And you're like, I'm going to buy this house now. I'm going to sell it 3 years from now. Well, the total yield is how much financial benefit you've had over the course of the project based on how much you had to invest. And that's a different approach, because you're basically putting, at the time you buy it, a fixed time when you're ending it out of it. These other two are more open-ended. I would say the most open-ended of the 3 is the cash on cash return. What is your desired financial benefit? That's something everybody has to decide for themselves. Are you looking for increased equity? Are you looking for your net worth to grow rather than having a steady form of income or profit? Those are 2 different strategies. Those are 2 different approaches. You won't know if you're successful until you've identified for yourself which one of those is working for you. What is the after repair value of the property you're acquiring? And this is kind of an art form. There's no science to this because there are so many parameters. You have to get once you start investing, you sort of get used to what sort of finish out, what kind of level of work you want to do, and after repair value on that. So let's say that there's someone that buys a property and they want to finish it out with Formica and linoleum floors and basic fixtures, no upgrades. Well, that's fine. There's a value associated with that. Let's say somebody else wants to do granite and hardwood floors and updated fixtures and premium colors and accents. Well, that's fine. there's another value associated with that. Keep in mind, figure out that you're to in that project, because if you're using lending, especially, that's going to be the driving factor of the value that the bank places or the lender places, so you know what your loans are. When you're first starting, it's great to have an investor knowledgeable realtor to work with you. They can ask you the right questions. Not every realtor is able to live on that side of the spectrum, but every realtor should know someone that can help you get to that sort of decision. So pick your partners wisely, because this is a very important number for you. How much cash and lending do I need? So if you are looking at a deal and you can't get the financing, it's not a good deal for you. Or if you're looking at it and you don't have enough cash to get into it, it's not a good deal for you. So somebody else who might have a whole lot more available in their cash bucket, it might be a great deal for them. Someone just texted me today, a friend of mine, and he's doing this amazing project, but the purchase price of the raw property was close to $1 million. That's not where I play. I play in the lower end. That's where I'm safe. But he's been doing this a while, and I get to go see his property tomorrow, and I expect he'll make good money, but those wouldn't be good deals for me. And conversely, he doesn't really like the kind of stuff I do, which is great. You know, we're not competing for the same deals, but we still have gifts that we can share with each other. So that's the kind of thing I love about this industry is you don't have to all be chasing the same bunny, but you're all learning bunny chasing tips together. And you have to determine how long do you foresee remaining in this project. Now, keep in mind that can always change, but have a plan. Don't just go in there going, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do. No, have a plan. You can change the plan with strategic forethought. But if you go in there with no idea what you want to do, you're just going to fail. It just doesn't work out that way. So let me see. I saw something here. How much leverage would you success not to exceed at the beginning? You know what? I think that is a great question. But you're going to hear different answers depending on the person answering it. I'm going to say if your portfolio is somewhere between 50 and 60% leveraged, based on value, that's pretty good. That's where I'm comfortable. But some people are comfortable with much less leverage. Some people want absolutely no leverage. And some people are fine being leveraged to the hilt. The way you execute the level of leverage in your portfolio is going to change your strategy dealing with that portfolio. I would suggest you find a good mentor that is adept at maintaining the type of leverage that you want to achieve in your portfolio. So I am not one of those for the all cash, no lending. I'm not that person. And I'm also not the one that wants to be highly, highly leveraged. Now, I'm going to tell you this. Sometimes what looks like it's not highly leveraged, you have a significant emotional turn, you are have highly leveraged because your values have it. So you have to stay on top of what happens if your values drop, what happens to your cash flow, what happens to your expenses. And I will say this, a lot of people were happy at how high the housing values have gone in the past couple of years, but it has not helped my business. It has diminished my cash flow. So keep in mind that market factors will impact different strategies differently. The key performance indicator I spend most of my time with is the cash on cash return. And that's with the BRRRR method. And if you see at the bottom, it's the buy property, rehab the property, rent the property, refinance the property, and repeat all that to grow. That's what I've been following for the past few years. And we're just going to walk through kind of what this means for me. What are some terms? I feel like there's so much information to get through. I'll let you know. I have a spreadsheet that I want to run some scenarios with. However, if I don't get to it in the allotted time, those that want to stay and play with it are more than welcome. Okay. So my minimum, Julie's minimum cash on cash return is 15%. I look at a deal, and if I can't see 15% at the very beginning, I toss it out and go on to the next one. It has taken me years to be able to just do that quickly. Yes, and that's just the first step. So I look at a deal, do I see at least 15%? I will look further. Some people want more, some people don't look at that metric. That's okay. For me, this works, and I'll get into why that is later. So once you know what your metric is, look at your purchase price of the asset. You can buy a house, say, that costs $10,000 but needs $150,000 worth of work, or a house that costs $100,000 and only need $10,000 worth of work. It depends on where you want to live and that whole thing. Here's what's a light rehab. Go in there, the foundation's good. You change the paint, you change some flooring, change countertops. The layout stays the same. Boop, 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 in, out. That is fairly easy, but that's not what I enjoy. I like the stuff that looks toe up, almost needs to be condemned. The stuff that the foundation is collapsing, the roof is collapsing, maybe there's been some fire damage, probably lots of non-human inhabitants in the place, so it looks nasty. I like the stuff that makes people go, ew. And then I like to make it pretty. That's what I enjoy. I also encourage that whatever investment strategy you pursue, that you enjoy it, because there's going to be times when it's an absolute grind. And you have to enjoy it enough and be fulfilled by it enough to keep going when it is that absolute grind. So the next step is you have to estimate your total cost to improve that property. And that's going to include, whoops, hold on. That's going to include things like your holding costs, your financing costs, all what it takes to get that property from the way you buy it to the way you want it to be finished. So utility costs, accruals, etc. And that takes experience. If you're starting out as a new investor, please get someone to help you. It's cheaper to pay someone to help you get that number, get to a better ballpark, than it is to say, I'm not going to pay anyone to help me. I can do it, when you can't. Or worse yet, ask somebody that is not prepared to give you a good, some good direction. Your purchase price, you can figure that out. It's what you negotiate. But the cost it takes to improve that property, that's the skill that's developed while being in the game. Newbies generally do not get that right. So find the right person that can help you until you feel comfortable doing it yourself. You're going to have lending costs. Now, every lender that you consider, even if it's your own money, you have to take into account that if you're using your money, you're borrowing it from yourself. So you have to manage that cost, that opportunity cost of it not being where it is for it to fund this new deal. Every third-party lender has different terms. They have points, they have fees, they have the interest rates, they have et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What I like to suggest is that you build a spreadsheet that you can put in all these different terms and help figure out over the course of your project, they're lending the cheap. Boring, it's tedious, but it's what you need to do so you can pick the best lender for whatever particular project. And response time is one of those things that's important. So you can have a lender that has great costs, maybe very low points, low origination fees, great interest rate, but they take so long to get into the deal. Of no use to you, what my opinion. You can disagree, but in the real estate investing business that I've been participating in, timeliness in the response is important for success. So if your lender offers these great hypothetical terms, but you're never able to use them, I don't consider them useful at all. You have to look at the amount of the loan that you'll be able to get. So that's part of the terms you understand from the lender. If a lender says we offer 90% of cost or 90% of ARV, everybody gets that same term. So the conversation you have to have with the lender is, given my experience, given my credit rating, given my net worth, given my this, and this, what terms can I expect? Or better yet, tell me what impacts the terms that you offer, and be upfront, because you don't want to be blindsided. You want to get the terms you will actually get so that you can predict what these costs are and what your loan amount's going to be, because that's a big factor. And based on a loan, you're going to calculate your PITIA, which is your principal, interest, taxes, insurance, and association fees if you have them from being in a homeowners association. And there are people that rent that who are landlords in homeowners associations. I personally avoid them like the plague. I am not going to buy a house as an asset in a homeowners association, which means a lot of the stuff I buy is older. And that's why I live in a different part of the playing field than maybe some other people would. I live in a homeowners association. If I wanted to repair or upgrade my house, that's not an easy process. It's not quick, and it's subject to people who have no urgency like I would have in trying to get that house renovated. I won't do it. Doesn't mean it's not something somebody else should do. It's just, it would drive me absolutely bonkers. So once you have all these numbers, you have to figure out your total cash investment in this property. So it's going to be the purchase price plus your cost to improve that property, plus the lending costs, both to get into it the first time and to refinance, less your loan. And that's how much cash you still have left in that deal. And then that's the number that's used to determine your cash on cash return. So it's the rent you get from the property, subtract your PITIA all over the total cash you have invested. And this is the number I want to be at least 15% before I even look at the deal further. It's not like it has to be 15% after I do all my calculations. No, I'm not even going to look further into that deal until I can see at least 15% on the table. So the avenue for success. And this is by no means complete. This is just what I came up with before we did this presentation. By the way, thank you so much to Shamir and Hannah for helping me create this presentation, for the wonderful graphics. And by the way, just complete aside, I like having visuals when I'm talking about Pitranomics. When I first started, I just got on and started talking. I didn't always know what I would talk about, but now we're making plans, and I hope that's more informative to you. Would appreciate the insight or feedback, because I'm really beginning to feel we're generating a body of knowledge for people. So the first step, find an experienced mentor or coach, or mentor and coach. And these are the things to consider. Whatever it is you want to do in your investing journey, make sure they have experience in that. So I wouldn't want someone to come with me and say, oh, how do I do REITs? Oh, no, I don't do real estate investment trusts. That's not something I have been the slightest bit interested in doing. I have done syndications where I'm a passive investor. That's slightly different, but even that is not my main focus. And there are people that you could go to and say, hey, I want to learn how to invest in REITs optimally, or I want to invest in syndications optimally. Those are great people to talk to, but that's not me. I can help you find maybe, but that's not really what I do well. The experienced coach will help stress test your investments. And by that, I mean all of your assumptions that you put into calculating your success metric, like for me, the cash on cash return. You need to make sure that you're actually doing those with the right assumptions. And a mentor or coach will help you with that. There's no way to know until you learn. And the best way to learn is to do it, and do it with somebody that can help you. That way you will avoid the common mistakes. I know there's one person in particular that worked with me or asked me to be a mentor, paid for my opinion, and then completely ignored my advice. So, what do? You just go along with that. And you have to build your team. You won't start out with a team. That's where the mentor / coach, or mentor and or coach, can help you. Because I will share this. When I started on my first journey, the first contractor that I hired was extremely recommended. In fact, within Lifestyles, he had been like, oh my gosh, he's amazing. But what happens when you publicly say somebody's amazing? Everybody wants to use him. And his business grew like it was an explosion. And he didn't have the people to continue the greatness. And then he didn't me, so I had to get somebody else. So starting your own team, find contractors. My first deal had a general contractor that did all the work. I am now pretty much the general contractor, but I wouldn't have started that at first. I mean, it was good to have an experienced contractor kind of walk me through what I needed. And even though I was a little bit resentful about all this extra work that had to come in, he was right. Now I know that. Then I was like, you're just taking my money. But he was right. And he was a really, really good contractor for beginners. And I'm trying to remember his name. Finishing Touches is the company, Blake something. He's still in business and he's still great. But now I want a little more control. So I don't use him because he's bad. I just am putting myself in that position now. And then you want good attorneys because you want to make sure real estate as a risky endeavor is shielded from whatever else you have going on. And I put title escrow agents here because most people who buy and sell a house, especially for residential real estate, don't think the title company is all that important, and they think the title companies are all interchangeable. I will tell you that is not true. A good escrow agent that you partner with to learn your business is invaluable. I try very hard not to use anybody other than the one that I form the relationship, that knows my business, that helps me understand what to look out for, that helps me realize maybe something I want to pursue isn't something that I can pursue. It's really best to make sure you make that good partnership. And a lot of times those aren't on the list of people that you need to pursue a partnership with. Whoops, what happened here? Okay, what happened? How did that happen? Sorry, guys. I don't know. I'm just gonna have to scroll through. I'm still learning this. Okay, come on, Julie. Okay, let's not mess that up. Okay. Also on your team should be investor knowledgeable realtors. Realtors are great. You can always choose a good one. I know that sometimes we as realtors, and I am one, we get a bad rep, but that's because the person didn't pick the one most suitable for what they were trying to do. That's what I believe. There may be some bad realtors. I can't personally say I know of a bad realtor, but I know there are some that are incompatible with what I'm trying to do. I'm not saying that they aren't, but I'm just saying a lot of it is a lack of compatibility. And if you're going to invest in real estate as a revenue producing asset, then maybe the realtor you use to buy and sell your home, the personal home, then that's the perfect home and you're very happy there, isn't the person to help guide you in a more pragmatic approach to real estate. So it's important to be able to distinguish the two. And I will either that realtor will many invest or is an investor. Someone who doesn't have either of that experience may not be suitable for a new investor to work with. One of the things that happens is that the lines get blurred about what that realtor can happen or help with or assist with or not assist with. And then both people are open to unexpected liabilities, and it can be a hot mess that the lawyers then untangle. So pick your realtors, pick your attorneys, pick your escrow agents, pick your insurance agent. I got to tell you, again, just like with the residential real estate, if you've had that insurance agent and they've insured your home and your cars and everything's great, well, it's a completely different world when you're trying to make sure you're mitigating risk on your investment portfolio. So please, please, please reach out. The investor knowledgeable realtors will know appropriate insurance and always be searching. I've talked a lot about lenders. You're going to find talking to a lender, they will always say, yeah, we can handle your business. I've never met a lender that told me they couldn't handle what I do. But you got to have a deeper conversation because most of the times they can't help me because their products that they offer are not at all useful for what I'm trying to do. But I try to listen every time somebody says they can help me. And I have a list of questions. And then I can usually figure out inside of 20 minutes whether or not this person's going to be useful in my business. That's something that's come with experience. I couldn't have done that in the beginning. And sometimes I will say this when I'm not interviewing, when I'm trying to find information out about what someone can offer to me, it may come across as brusque, but I'm trying to get to the place where, can I use you? Do you want me as a client? That's what I'm trying to get to. Let's get to that quickly. And I'm no hard feelings if it doesn't work out, but I'm definitely trying to get there quickly. And one I cannot stress enough is the tax advisor, the tax strategist. Once you start investing in real estate, that's a whole different ball game from a tax perspective. It absolutely has to be approached in a strategic way, not a reactive way. And so you want someone not only that's good at tax mediation strategies, but that understands what you can do in the real estate realm. And if you find that person, hold on to them and seek their advice. They're not cheap, but they're cheaper than an audit where that you fail to defend yourself. Just think of it that way. And then be teachable and curious. I have been accused of being attracted by the shiny objects, but I'm always looking for something that can be useful in my business. Whether or not it can be immediately useful, I like to grab that little morsel of information and hold on to it and let it percolate, and then I can bring it out at a later date. And you got to be teachable. Doesn't matter how long you've been doing something. If you aren't able to say, I am still a student, then you're falling behind. Always be willing to learn. I learn from everybody, even the people that aren't doing exactly what I want to do. Now, hold on, let me be honest. Sometimes I'm not as open to learning, sometimes in a bad mood, whatever. But if somebody says something that triggers ooh, I don't know that, and it can be useful, my ears get big, and I'm trying to have those conversations to learn. Even if I can't use it immediately, any new nugget of information I've acquired has always proven to be useful in the long term. And since I'm a long-term player, that gives me the motivation to always be curious about new things. So, what sources of capital? And we talked about this. I think the question was, how much should we have? This is my guideline for cash in hand. If you're going to use leverage and you're going to buy and renovate a property that is going to be worth, say, $100,000 at the end, let's make it more realistic, $250,000 at the end, then you need to have 30 to 40% of that cash, of that $250,000 in hand, especially when you're new, because you don't know what contingencies can come in and throw you off. It is good to have too much cash at the beginning than to not have enough, because then you're pursuing very expensive sources of cash. But if you're using 100% of your cash, then you should have about 150% of the ARV, just in case something happens. When I go back to the first deal that I was in, the purchase price plus that, fortunate on hand. And I didn't use a lender for that. I refinanced, but then I also still had more cash in the deal than I had expected. The total cost was higher than expected. If I hadn't had the cash to pursue or access to avenues of cash, I would have just lost the house and I would have been completely disillusioned with investing. What has happened is, they've become delusioned on the first step, and they never take the time to hold on to it long enough for it to actually be a revenue producing asset that yields great value. So there's something called hard money. It's called hard for a reason. They have a whole lot of fees. They are expensive, but you can get into them quickly. Some of them, you can send them a deal and they can fund you within 48 hours. If that responsiveness to getting the deal closed is what you need, then hard money is a great source, but it's called hard for a reason. And then there's private money. The first mentor I spoke with about real estate investing, he had a father-in-law that supplied the money for his initial investment. The father-in-law gave great rates. I didn't have that. I had Pitra money that I started with. Still pretty good rates, but And I'm thankful for the fact that we were able to accumulate enough that I had that money to invest in real estate, but that is a legitimate source of money, your private money. There's what's called a qualified mortgage. So that could be conventional mortgages or FHA mortgages. But in particular, there's something called a 203K FHA. That kind of sounds like a rap song, 203K FHA. You're not with me? Okay, anyway. And I know of a couple that has pursued that option. So they'll buy a house with this FHA and they'll fix it for 2 years at a profit, and then they'll put the profits toward the next house and do the same thing and fix it up. They live in my neighborhood. They've been doing this, I think, at least 12, 13 years. And I'm pretty sure they've amassed a great deal of equity on their balance sheet from doing it just like that. For the long-term planner, any of you can do that. You can buy the home, renovate it, live in it for a bit, and then sell it. They've moved quite a bit. They had kids probably about my kids' age, so their kids are grown now. I just didn't perceive my husband wanted to move that much. But if you're down for it as a couple, hey, that's a way to do it. Just keep moving and keep moving on up. Again, personal money. If you have it, great, use it. Keep in mind that real estate investing is not guaranteed. So be, proactive about protecting your personal money. There's using the seller of the properties. So you can buy a property, you can always ask, will you sell or finance it to me? Particularly if you want to rehab it, you can sell or finance, and then that's cheaper than going into the hard money. You come up with the rehab costs, and then you give yourself, say, 6 months to a year, and then you refi out of that. The seller gets maybe more advantageous pricing plus some return. You have cheaper financing than hard money available. So that's something to consider. Is that it? That's it. So I want to say this is just a taste of what's to come. There will be a real estate boot camp coming. Oh my God, I hope Q2 of 2024. So plan on it. And let's see, where are we on time? So we're close to 7 o'clock. I knew this was a lot of information. So thank you for listening to the presentation. Are there any questions, and are there any people that want to stick around and sort of go through the spreadsheet and some of the calculations I've created there? So just any questions or comments or testimonies?
I have a question.
Yes, sir. How you doing? Good to see you.
Oh, pretty good. How are you?
I'm good.
I heard you mention earlier in your presentation that because the dynamics of the market is changing, um, interest rate, the price hikes in the houses, home buying has slowed a bit, and you said it has affected your market in some way.
Mhm.
Can you explain how has it affected you?
How have the increase in values affected me?
Yeah, in what way?
Okay, so keep in mind when you lease a house or lease a property, you enter into a contract with that tenant for the amount of money that they will pay. And some of my leases have been like 1 and 2 year leases. Well, when the prices spike, the when they do the yearly assessments, they spike. Sometimes the millage increases, which is the percent of the assessed value that is charged for taxes. And so you can see, as I have seen, 40% increase in property taxes, which goes directly to your bottom line. And then, but you are contracted for a certain amount of rent. And then it's also not likely that you can say, okay, I want to, let's say your taxes are, I don't know, I want to say what, let me go back to a rule of thumb. I used to have it where I would consider 1/3 of my rent to taxes and insurance of the year. So of the 12 months, 4 months of it covers taxes and insurance. And the rest of it is my gravy. Well, now it's like half of the annual rent. And then if you're still acquiring or refinancing, the interest rates have gone up so much, and that pretty much takes care of the rest. So a property that 3 years ago was a great cash flowing instrument that you were maybe for say $1,000. Here's another thing: tenants rents are good, the landlords are greedy. Not necessarily. 2 years ago, if you rented that house for $1,000 and you were making say 200 a month on it, now the rents have gone up to say 1,200 or 1,300, and you're not making any, but you still got to pay for maintenance. So it becomes something untenable. And you got to figure out, maybe this is not the asset. Maybe I need to now turn this over to the market, let it be an owner occupied property, because owner occupied properties, you can mitigate how high your taxes go every year. Not so much, because there's a cap on how much they can increase each year. But if it's not owner occupied, you'll see it go from this to this. What do? You roll with it and you discover new strategies. That I'm going to put my glasses on so I can see. There you go. So did that help some there?
Yes, it did. The
Okay.
only reason why I was asking because I had we was talking about this just yesterday with one of my colleagues and stuff about how he was looking at the market and what he was willing to do. But I said, right now, I said, you sure this is something you want to do? Because the dynamics of the market has changed quite a bit. And it's not like it was, but not even 4 or 5 years ago. It's different. And if you're new trying to get into this, like, I don't know, trying to get rentals or doing a flip or whatever, you know, I said, man, you might want to take another look at this before you jump into this because it's totally different. And the money you got to bring to the table is going to be a whole lot more.
Yeah,
So,
but keep in mind, there's always going to be a way to make money, no matter what situation is going. You just have to tweak your strategy. But if you're locked into something, like a lease, and it's difficult to, like, there's one house, there's no way I can go from 1,000 to 1,500 a year, a month. I can't do that. So maybe that property is something that needs to be sold. But there are other properties where I've increased the rent probably, let's see, in the past 2 years, like 20%, and it's still not cash flowing. And also, the equity in that property is so great. Even if there are corrections now, the past 3 years have seen it go from here to here. So now I'm looking at it not cash flowing where I want to. The equity is there. Even if I take a little bit of a lower price than what is currently marketable, great deal of equity, it's time to start doing some exchanging. And I'm looking at trying to do a 1031 exchange right now, my first one, into something cheaper and better associated with my strategy.
do you see the market recovering anytime soon to get back to where maybe there'll be a lot more palatable for more people to buy homes? Because right now, the way that it's looking, uh, your market is diminishing for buyers.
So I wasn't really planning on getting into this, but I'll discuss it a little bit. If you have been lucky enough to have homes for more than 5 years, definitely more than 3, but say 5 or more, and you have leverage against it, then you have an opportunity to sell that home, sell or finance, make better money than you would rent it, and have it be a better solution for the person in the home that's no longer. So there is that option. There's always something to do, right? It just may not make sense to hold that property as a rental property going forward, but that doesn't mean you can't transform it into another type of revenue producing instrument. Does that make sense? Yeah. So people who are having trouble getting into properties because of the increased cost now or these high interest rates, you can turn around and offer them a fairly decent interest rate. And what they're paying for is the difference between what they buy it for and your total leverage in the deal. Not to mention, as I've understood from my CPA, that it's less of a tax hit. I don't have to necessarily go through a 1031 exchange if I turn around and offer this or financed, I'm not taking that money in the current year. And one thing I'll say, people need to realize that when you have to know how that's going to be taxed before you make it. That's why you need to make those plans. If you're a wage earner and you work for a corporation and then you get on and they have you fill out, come on, W-4, you do your deductions or whatever, that's one thing. But when you're a business person, you have to make sure you have all of your expenses that help mediate some of the revenue so that your net income isn't too high. Because on that net income that you make as an independent business person, you're paying Social Security, which is twice what a wage earner pays. So it's the Social Security tax, you're paying Medicare, and then you're paying taxes. So all of that has to be considered before you make the money on how you want to do that. And so I've been exploring options on how to transition to the next stage because I couldn't have predicted COVID when I started. And there was a huge spike in property value. And that spike is great for sellers. And I probably could have sold everything when the properties were high, but the problem is, what would I then be buying? So now I'm seeing a path to transitioning out of some of these houses into something I can still buy that makes sense for my real estate strategy. Does anybody feel like sticking around to go through this spreadsheet? It's kind of involved, but if you're game, I'm game. Or we can just like wait for the boot camp because I know it's already 7 minutes past our hour.
I would love to
I'm
stay.
okay with sticking around.
You okay with sticking around? Okay, let me get my glasses on. You know, that's one thing about getting older, man. Can't see without my glasses. Now, keep in mind, I don't make the prettiest spreadsheets, which is why I don't share them. But hopefully we can follow these. They make sense to me, but they might not make sense to anybody else. Okay, I don't know.
I got a question for you, Miss Julia.
Yes.
Do you have any of your properties in a real estate trust?
No, all of them are in LLCs. Okay, I don't know what the retry. I want you to go away. Okay. What is that? We'll just erase that. So the number that I've actually worked on. So really went into the be worth about $120,000 that I would get $1,200 a month rent. It would cost $60,000, take about $35,000 to renovate, have about $2,000 cost for refinancing. And all the green stuff is stuff I can play with this. If this loan amount based on the 75% loan to value I anticipated, the high 9% interest rate on a 30-year term. And then, so this is my principal and interest. I have a set number that I use for my tax calculations. If you look at the cell here, it's 2.9% of the after value. It's a little bit of extra conservative calculation in my numbers. And then my estimate on hazard insurance, there's no homeowner's insurance, and this is my principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. There's not a lot of gross profit per month, but I anticipated only having 7,000 in the deal. Based on the 7,000 left in the deal and my gross profit, that is a cash on cash return of 15%. This does not account for depreciation expense, which would take this number lower on my tax return. That's a whole separate issue. My net equity would be about 23%, and my return on the equity in this project about 4.5%. And I'll come down to these yield calculations later. What I actually have is something valued at $135,000. Rent is still $1,200, at least quickly. They haven't moved in yet, but the lease is signed. So turned out did a little bit more in renovation, a little bit less in the loan refinancing. Got an 80% loan to value at 9% interest rate on a 20-year loan. Now, by the way, this is not a 20-year fixed. This is a 20-year, 5-year fixed. So I anticipate doing some refinancing in the future. What's important about this loan that I have is that there is no prepayment penalty. The one that I had intended to go in did have a prepayment penalty. So I was like, let me slide over here. What that means is if I refinance quickly, I don't have to pay this other random fee to be able to get out of that loan. All right. So I go down here and my principal, interest, taxes, and insurance is not that far off, and it makes very little money per month. But there is negative money in the deal. After I go through getting the loan and taking away the cost to purchase and the cost for renovations and the cost for financing, I will have a net cash in there. And I will intend to refinance if the rates go down. Here's the thing. I don't know if the rates are going to go down. They were unrealistically low for a while. I wasn't able to refinance this deal at those rates because I didn't have this deal. But as you can see, it's still something that I wish to pursue. I am hoping for lower rates. Most of my properties that are leveraged are around, well, before the last few, at about between 4.5% to 5.5%. So let's just put this here. If I were able to get this at 5.5%, then my monthly profit really changes. But it's not right now, so I go with what I know I can get. Okay, I have $6,500 extra cash than I did before. The reason why my cash on cash return looks negative is because there is a negative number on cash in the deal. I have a net equity of 33,000. I need to just copy this over. And so the return on equity metric looks horrible, but that is not the metric I look at. It's actually cash on cash return, which looks horrible, but I have the benefit of the $6,500. So if I take that $6,500 and divide it, say, over 3 years, I'm still getting a cash on cash return. It's just been front loaded, if that makes sense. If I there's some important concept, but we'll just keep going. Look at cost to get into all the revenue generate from rent, and then the anticipated proceeds from the sale of property, assuming, and this number I'm using, annual appreciation of the asset. Now, I have seen greater appreciation than 3% of my assets since I've been in it, but on average, 3% is a good number. I wouldn't go higher for long range planning, and you can go 2%. My Fort Worth area, this is fair. In most of Texas, I think it still works. If somebody disagrees with me, it's fine. You do your calculations based on what you think they should be, determine what measures success for you forward. It's important to realize that this is not the only way to do it. This is my way that I'm sharing. So if I say my property is going to appreciate at 3% a year over 5 years, that means my future value is $139,000 and some change. I have sale proceeds. I use a number of 92% of sale price to get the actual proceeds. That counts for commissions and closing costs. That means that I have a total yield from the project, including the rent that I have been paid over the 5 years. And here's the thing, if I plan it for 5 years, that's what my calculations are based on. You can change it, but total yield is all the benefit I get over what I had in the deal. So that $38,000 that I get over the 7,000 to have in it means my total is 400% per year. So when you think about it, where can you place $7,000 and have it turn into $38,000 in 5 years with that kind of return? Not many places, but this is not passive. I just want you to know you're just not lying in the buckwheat waiting for this money to come in. You have to work toward it. I like doing this kind of work. I'm not going to say I'd do it if it were free, but I think I'd enjoy it even if it weren't as lucrative because it challenges my mind. So you have I think a very nice return on the money. The secret is in doing it over and over and over. Now, if you were to flip it based on its current value of 120,000, you'd make 15,000. How much you actually take home depends on your own tax circumstances. So I'm not as interested in flips. I am fortunate that I don't need the money I make from real estate to live. This is a wealth producing vehicle for me, which makes it different. It's not like providing, shelter and food and car payments. It's the extra thing that I'm trying to do. So I'm lucky that way. And this is anticipated. Now, with my actual value of this, if I go back and say, okay, that actual value, and by that, I mean the appraised value. I'm not selling it, so I don't know what someone's selling it for. So some of these are suppositions. Then in 3 years, it should be worth about $156,000 at sale. My total yield is $36,000, but remember, I've already gotten that 6,500 here. The reason why the yield looks negative is because the cash in the deal is negative again, but it's still a pretty good return. It's an arbitrary number. Cash showing it's basically you return over become an error number. So, but instead of making just so you could it to. And this was actually, I'll tell you this too. This is kind of funny. What I intended to do with the house when I bought it and the level of renovation was not what I actually did to it. Changing your mind is perfectly okay as long as you are still being strategic about the possible outcomes. And everybody should be able to generate a spreadsheet like this for themselves. I don't believe in sharing spreadsheets because when I create it, I know all of my assumptions. I don't necessarily have the ability to communicate all of those if I were to pass the spreadsheet to someone. But I think it's important that whoever you get as a mentor or coach helps you create your own spreadsheets. Please become a friend of spreadsheets. Now, and the reasons why I do this type of investing is I am looking forward to the appreciation of the asset that improves our net worth. The other thing that you can consider on an asset like this, let's say you hold it. Let's say if this is a 20-year term, you have 20 houses and you can cycle them over a period of 20 years. And it doesn't have to be for you. It could also be for your heirs. So in 20 years, you will have paid down this mortgage. You can again refinance this property for cash that is not a taxable event to obtain. And that's the beauty of this. You just keep recycling. And this says I don't know what that word is, but we won't worry about it. So you get to have a non-taxable cash infusion at a later date because you've now increased the equity in your property due to your tenant paying the mortgage. And this is why it's important that your tenant pay the mortgage because they're funding this increase in equity. Additionally, if you are an active real estate professional, which is my tax classification, then you have this depreciating expense or this asset that you can take depreciation expense against. And so what it looks like is you might have either zero or a net loss on this property, cash flowing, but not a taxable profit. And it can also offset other active income, which makes it a tax mediation strategy. Depending on your tax classification, I am no CPA, disclaimer, always look for a tax strategist or a tax professional that will give you advice based on your particular circumstances. So don't look at what somebody else does and says, yes, I'm going to do that, because you don't know all the details of what they're doing. And then if you do this with volume, then you can reimburse your inflow of cash here. You can use, let's say this was a more expensive property and you get enough cash back so you can take this cash and buy something else. Or if you have 3 or 4 of them, you can do it. It's all about growing. And that's what you want to do with your any kind of investment strategy. You want to take the returns and reinvest so it continues to grow that much faster. Do you understand the basics of this spreadsheet? You guys, any questions about it?
Thanks for sharing. That was helpful.
Oh, hey there, lady. How are you?
I'm well. Sorry, I'm late.
Oh, that's okay. I'm glad you're here.
Yeah.
So I make a lot of these spreadsheets. I have one that is pretty complex that I put most of my deals in. And it just, I don't feel like it would make sense to anybody else, but it's, I call it napkin analysis because I used to, whenever I was trying to figure out something, I would write on the back of a napkin. And it's like something I can put a few numbers in, see if I get to my 15% and move on if it doesn't. So a tool that you use for analyzing, hopefully that you create yourself. I am not a fan of using anyone else's tools because you need to make sure you understand all of the underlying assumptions. All of them. So like, for example, it is clear to me, I know it, that my annual taxes are, what's the word? A rough rule of thumb. I know that. I don't believe it's absolute, but I do make sure I put in the actual when I'm looking at my numbers. If you don't know that, you might not consider such things. I have a rule of thumb that I used to use for hazard insurance. It used to be 0.86% of value. That was my number, but these days I just said, you know what, let me get a quote. I want to know what the quote is because I can't seem to predict insurance rates these days. They are crazy. So it makes sense to me to do this as a 5-year hold if that's the plan. For me, it makes sense to do this as a buy and hold. Even though that doesn't look like a lot of money, I'm fine with it because I have the payments covered for a while from this deal, and I do plan to refinance should it the rates come down. And if the rates come down, I may go a year fix so that I do the uptick again, if that makes sense. So anyway, let me say that I think that it's really good for people to get the right type of help, to get a good mentor or coach, someone that can walk you through a lot of this and explain it to you. We that heard that you need to find a good mentor, you need to be a good mentee. So I thank y'all for sticking with me about half an hour past our time. I'm trying to grow my YouTube presence. I'm trying to grow my other social media presence. So you can watch this on my Facebook page. You can watch it on YouTube. I appreciate it if you subscribe and comment. And unless there are any more questions or comments, I thank y'all for your patience and appreciate your sticking with me.
Thank you for sharing your knowledge. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome. I hope everybody has a lovely evening, and I'll see you guys next Thursday. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.